The Batman is the best Batman movie ever. First of all, let me just say that this is hands down the best Batman solo film ever. Now, I say that because, one, I'm not the biggest fan of the Nolan trilogy. I know people will think that's crazy, but they aren't the Batman character. And then they aren't the Batman character that I'm used to reading in the comics. And then you have Batfleck, who I loved, but he shared the screen with Superman and Wonder Woman, so it was more of a Justice League movie than it was a Batman movie. But with this movie, this is then you have Keaton, which obviously I grew up with, and I love, but this is just way better and newer and fresher in my opinion. So that makes this hands down the best Batman solo movie ever. That's what I've been telling everybody. This is the best one. This is better than the Nolan movies. Obviously, it's better than Keaton, and I still like Batfleck, but this Robert Pattinson to me did a great job with this. And one of the first things I'll say is that yes, Batman has been a detective. In the Batfleck version, he was a detective, but this one is more of a detective movie. That's what this is. This is a detective movie with Batman in it, starring Batman, the Riddler, all the characters. And you're seeing him work a case from the beginning. He's recording everything with his bat tech, which is awesome. That adds the element to it, with it being, there's just so many elements of the Batman character that you can make a great film like this with. And one of them is the tech. So he's recording everything. He's writing notes on everything. He's got the inner monologue like you would a detective story. All that is in this movie. It's there. So he's working a case from beginning to end, trying to find the Riddler. That was awesome. That's what I've always wanted to see in a Batman movie, was him being a detective. He's known as the world's greatest detective in the DC world, but we don't really see it that often. You see little bits and pieces. Yeah, Bale was, he was like, Bale had the shot a bullet into a brick wall and then took the brick out and like remade the bullet and did all this other stuff that was like detective stuff, but it was just kind of on another level, and it didn't really gel with me. So that's one of the big things about this is, and he wasn't a perfect detective. And that's the other thing about this movie that people got to understand. This isn't Batman. Batfleck was Batman, already been 20 years doing this and perfected it. And this is year 2 of Bruce Wayne's journey. So he made some mistakes. So he wasn't the perfect detective. He made a mistake with the clues. His Batmobile's stalling out. There's just a lot to show you that he's early on in this mission. And that's one of the other elements I loved about this. You're seeing an origin without the origin that we've always seen. So I love that element to this. And you can just see, a movie like this, you have to make a trilogy. You have to see because there's so many layers to the character. It has to be a progression. It can't just be everything in one movie. So obviously in the next movie, he'll be a little more seasoned. He'll probably learn how to use Bruce Wayne as a character. And you'll see just a lot more of the Batman that we're used to seeing, where he doesn't make mistakes. Everything's planned out perfectly. And I just think I love seeing that. I hope we see that progression. They're already greenlighting shows, so I can't imagine they don't at least make another one of these. All right. Another element that I loved about this too is the no-kill rule. Now, I know there's a lot of people that talk about whether he should kill, he should not kill. Michael Keaton killed people in Batman. Ben Affleck did. Zack Snyder came out and said, yeah, of course he did. So, but to me, with the no kill rule makes the Batman character more interesting. The other thing was the penguin car chase, which is probably one of the best scenes in the movie. At the end, he hits him, and the car like goes flying, and you know, now was he trying to kill him at that point? I don't know, but how do you control, that situation where he's gonna survive that? Like you just can't. So I feel like if you just would have hit him and sideswiped him and he spun, that would have been better. But I feel like he kept that in because it was practical effects and the shot looked really awesome, and you just keep it in. But if they're going to introduce that rule, then let's stick to making sure visually it doesn't look like anyone could die. And I get that he's early on in his career and he's not as good at it, which is fine. But I'll just say I like that they introduced it and they stuck with it and made sure it was an element to his character. And so yeah, you have all the typical pillars of the character are there. You've got the detective mode, you've got the tech, you've got the gadgets. Although there was this one scene too, in that at the end of the car chase scene where the camera flips upside down and he's walking towards the penguin character, and he's got this huge pouch like hanging off the side of his leg. I'm just wondering like what the hell is in there? Like he's got all this stuff and you don't see him use a ton of it. But I'm just wondering what all is in there and what other stuff. You see him use a grappling gun a lot. That's a typical Batman thing. But yeah, it had all the elements to Batmobile. Obviously, you're going to do a Batman movie. You've got to have an awesome car chase showcasing the Batmobile. They definitely did that in this movie. It's down to the 66 Batman was a GTO, so the Batmobile is always a thing you have to have. They changed a little bit of, he's no longer in Wayne Manor, which Batfleck wasn't necessarily either, but this one he's in Gotham Tower or Wayne Tower, which is, I guess in the Arkham series, they introduced that too. I feel like this movie kind of leans into the Arkham series a bit, especially the vest and his his armor. It looks very similar to that. So I think they definitely leaned into that, which I'm happy about. I like I like that game. So everything's there, and the other thing is just like the Rogues Gallery. So let's get into all the Rogues Gallery and his villains and the side characters of this movie. All right, so the first villain that we're going to talk about is the Riddler. Now, this take on the Riddler is not question mark Blazer, Jim Carrey Riddler that you might be thinking of. This is a different take on the character. This is very much a insanely driven serial killer, leaving clues for Batman at every turn, almost daring to be caught in a way, or almost wanting to be caught, and I think being caught was part of his plan. So there's definitely some Zodiac killer references, leaving clues and whatnot. And then this movie is inspired by Seven as well, and you can see that with him kind of giving himself up, and that being, something Kevin Spacey's character did in Seven, and that was all part of his plan. So yeah, there's some inspiration behind that with the Riddler. But, at the core of who the Riddler is, he's someone who wants to outsmart Batman. He wants to be better than Batman. He's driven by that. And he's a control freak. And once his little game gets disrupted and things don't go his way, he crumbles, and he can't take it. And all that, was leading up to me, the scene in the interrogation scene where, that to me was the Riddler. The thing before that, when actors have to wear a mask and your voice is distorted, it's really hard to become the character. So I think once he was unmasked and became, he became more of the Riddler that I think I can see being in future movies, But I think it all just kind of led up to that culmination of that scene with him and Batman, because they he's trying to that's his moment to outsmart Batman, and he couldn't do it, and you can see him just completely break down in that moment. And that's what that's the core of the character to me, is figuring out a way at every turn to outsmart Batman. And watching Paul Dano in that scene, I think it was a joy to watch. Paul Dano was great in this. I just, most of the movie's in a mask, and you don't really, I'm sure he bought into this role thinking that he could explore it more without the mask. So I'm hoping that's the case. But yeah, other than that, he did a great job. I'd love to see more from him. So yeah, the Riddler was awesome. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the Penguin, which, if you haven't heard, is probably the best standout villain. I mean, he without him in this movie, it would be a totally different movie. He brought like a little bit of humor to this. Not like he was cracking jokes like a Marvel movie or anything, but he brought in a perfect amount of humor as someone who just thinks this whole thing is absurd, and he's just trying to make $1, and he's just like, what is going on here? Who's this guy dressed as a bat? Why are you in my club? Kind of thing. And Colin Farrell was unrecognizable in the role. He put on a lot of prosthetics for this movie, and he's unrecognizable, which I felt like allowed him to just kind of fall into that character, and that's probably why it was so good. I mean, he had the accent. You didn't even recognize it was him. I think that helps. Sometimes it can hurt an actor, but I think in this case it actually helped him just kind of fall into that Oswald Cobblepot character. There's this scene where the look to me is based off of, I told someone he looks like Robert De Niro's younger fat brother who like tried to become a crime lord, and he just had this like Robert De Niro vibe to me. Maybe it was from like Dick Tracy or something, but I can't remember. He's just this over the top Goodfellas type character. And there was also this one scene where at the end of the car chase scene where Gordon catches up to them, they tie Penguin up and tie his feet up, and tie his legs up, or his feet and his hands, and they leave him like that, and he's just kind of waddling around like a penguin. I just thought those moments were good to kind of break up, because otherwise this is a really, really dark movie. So I felt like it was good to kind of have something break that up, and I feel like Colin Farrell as the Penguin definitely brought. Every time you saw him, you knew he was going to at least make you smile or something. And I'm pretty sure the first series they're going to greenlight is the Penguin, so I can't wait to see that. All right, now let's get into Catwoman. Zoe Kravitz played Catwoman in this film, and I thought she was great. She was, if you've read Year One, she leaned heavily into that, I think, for inspiration, just based off her look and a little bit of her storyline. And Bruce and her, Batman and her, there was a scene where she has to put on the detective gear or the detective contact lenses, and I thought her interaction with Batman in that moment very much showed like how they would be. Like, she's not really putting up with him, and he's like can't really do anything about it. And I think I love seeing that with her kind of just putting Bruce in his place and calling the shots. Like, that's who Catwoman is to me. But you don't really, she doesn't have a ton to do in this movie. I mean, she does. You don't really know why she's become Catwoman. Is she a bank robber? I mean, is she just in this for a score? Trying to get a bag of money. There's also like her Carmine Falcone being her dad. They're adding that into the mix. So, which that's not like a new thing, but I just would I want to see. I like Zoe Kravitz, and I definitely want to see more from this, but you just didn't really get a whole lot from Catwoman in this as far as the character is concerned. And Yeah, so but they're rumored to have an HBO Max series. My theory is that she's gonna go to she leaves. They go on separate paths, obviously, and she's going to Bloodhaven, and I think what they'll do with that is her kind of fall into more of like not Carmine Falcone, but being a boss type criminal, not so much being the thief, but maybe hiring the thief, so she's kind of trying to build herself up. She's taking that bag of money. She's going to do something with it. I'm sure she's not just going to spend it all on whatever. Let's hope she does something like that. And when she returns to Gotham, she's got more power. Maybe she's got a crew with her. And, she's kind of a force to be reckoned with in Gotham, along with Penguin, along with Riddler. So we'll see. I mean, obviously Bloodhaven is where Nightwing spends his crime fighting nights. But it's obviously way too early on to tell what they're going to do with Robin. A lot of people would love for them to do Robin. And like I've been hearing rumors about like Kid Robin. I feel like if you're gonna do Robin, he needs to be a little bit older. He can't be a kid. It's just you just can't. It would be incredibly difficult to make that believable to have a kid out there. So, but they did show a lot of that in this movie. Where opening scene, you see a young kid with a red hood on. I caught that right away. And then the kid that's in the first fight with Batman, the one that runs away, he's got a red hood, So there's a lot of small Easter eggs in this. I'd love for them to introduce Robin at some point in this trilogy. I think you have to. But we'll see. I think it's a little early on. Let's see how they're going to time jump in Batman 2, I'm sure. So let's see how far they time jump. Maybe he's already 10 years or 5-6 years maybe, and Robin's already there. Who knows? But yeah, this is the Catwoman section of this, but I just want to make sure I get all my thoughts out there, and definitely want to see more from Catwoman. Love Zoe Kravitz cast in that role. Talk about Alfred. Now, this movie, Bruce and Alfred's relationship is pretty fractured, I think, at this point. Bruce is kind of doing his own thing. He's not listening to anybody, especially not Alfred. And to be honest, he's kind of a dick towards Alfred. And most of their interactions, there's a scene where, the typical "you're not my dad" scene, which always breaks your heart when like, he's trying, he doesn't have really. I'm sure this isn't the situation he wanted to be in either, with both parents being murdered and then you're having to take care of a young boy. So, but those moments were setting up that scene in the hospital where you think Alfred's gonna die. There was a point where I'm like, they're not gonna kill Alfred. That's kind of I don't think I would have liked that. But they didn't, and they didn't let it linger. It was like right away, he's alive. So, but yeah, there's a scene where when Alfred first wakes up, Bruce is there. But what's crazy is like, it's an emotional scene, but the first thing Bruce says is, "You lied to me." Like, not "How are you?" "I'm glad you're okay." It was like, "You lied to me." So he's still not. Their relationship isn't perfect, but what I love about this Alfred, even at every moment where Bruce is mean to him or whatever, he's still helping him. So like, he's a dick to him, and then Alfred's over there decoding that thing that Riddler left him, and is helping Bruce work the case. Even though he would rather him do something else, he's still gonna help him, and that's what I love about Alfred. Is like, he's always Bruce's punching bag, or he's there to lift him up, there to bandage him up. He's just there, whatever he needs him to be. And this Alfred, when you cast such a great actor like Andy Serkis, the sky's the limit with what he can do. And so I just want to see more of those interactions of Bruce and Alfred on the same page, helping each other. And I just think with Andy Serkis in that role, it's going to be amazing. All right, let's talk about Jeffrey Wright as Detective Gordon. First of all, perfect casting. I love Jeffrey Wright. Matt Reeves did such a good job with casting all these people, but um, to me, the interactions between Gordon and Batman were, jumped right off the comic book page. Um, I would love to know why Gordon trusts Batman so much. You don't really get explained, or they don't explain to you why do you trust this guy in a mask so much. And that's pretty huge in this movie because all these cops are looking at Gordon like, why are you letting this guy on our crime scene? So there's a lot of reasons. There has to be a good reason for that. But like I said, everything about Jeffrey Wright was perfect. I loved everything, every scene. I just wanted more, maybe. And I'm sure we'll see more. But you just know that he's going to become Commissioner Gordon. He's a detective now. And but the whole GCPD, Officer Martinez was one of my favorite characters in this movie. Like just the way he was just like, oh, it's Bruce Wayne. He's all happy. He's just like that cop that gets excited about stuff, and then he's just, I don't know. There was something about him that I really liked. I hope we see more of him, because he was kind of like against Batman, and then he kind of had a small arc in this movie where it's like they didn't want anything to do with him, and then now they're kind of on his side. So there's always going to be friction between Batman and the police, and Gordon has always been that buffer. But he's also like a smart ass towards Bruce, which I hope they continue that. I love that. But there's one scene I want to get into in particular was the rooftop scene. And this kind of talks more about how Bruce is still in his early stages. But something I wanted to say was I loved how when he got to he's punched Gordon in the face. It was a clip they released. He's shooting his way up with a Gatling gun all the way to the rooftop. He gets on the rooftop and he zips up his wingsuit or whatever. I was so excited when that happened. It was just that whole scene of him just leading up to that. Like you knew what he was going to do. You knew he was going to jump off that roof. You just didn't know how. And, but I just think it was awesome that he went for it. It's like you really get to see that this Batman like doesn't really care about much, including his life. He's willing to do whatever it takes just to not be caught, not for his name to not be exposed. So that's like a big deal to him, enough to where he will go up on a roof and fly off somehow. But he puts the wingsuit on, and I'm like sitting on the edge of my seat in the theater. It was just such an awesome moment. And he falls off and he starts gliding. He's descending through Gotham City at a fast rate, very fast. But you see this look on Robert Pattinson's face, like scared, like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing? And I thought that was so cool because this is crazy. Yeah, you think Batman gliding around looks cool and everything, but it's got to be terrifying at the same time just to jump off of a roof. And so you just see that. I would love to see a point where Bruce is like so cool with just jumping off of a roof and gliding, where it's like effortlessly he's doing it. Versus this, where you could definitely tell this is the first time he's done this, and he crashes, and he just had this moment of fear that I just love that Matt Reeves threw in there. And then he probably should have broken every bone in his body, but he didn't. Maybe it was the armor that caught him, but he lets his parachute out and glides to safety in a way. But I just love that scene so much, and I just thought Robert Pattinson did a great job too. Okay, so what's next for the Batman? I hope that they go all in with this Reeves verse, build Batman up, introduce Robin, introduce Ra's al Ghul, introduce Mr. Freeze, Clayface. I could see them introducing a character like Clayface that brings that fantastical element into this story, because Batman has some crazy villains, and I would love to see them all, not just a corner of Gotham. I want to see all of it, and I could definitely see that happening with what Matt Reeves is creating here. So we've got Penguin show next, possibly the Arkham show, which I think is a great idea, just to like start building that rogues gallery in Arkham. Have it be the Arkham that we know, where they're all in there, they break out, that kind of thing. Batman's constantly just revolving door, putting them in, they're coming out, that kind of thing. Because, but also I could see them doing Court of Owls in the next one. I think that's makes the most sense. They're kind of, you've got the crime boss thug level, and then you can work your way up, and you've got Court of Owls there pulling the strings, and then, you can do so many, not having them be the main villain, but, have them be an overarching villain and have typical villains in between there. So, yeah, and to be honest, the way the DCEU is right now, it's like, yeah, do I want the Snyderverse restored? Absolutely, but could I also see this becoming a place where you see Val Zod, or maybe Brazilian Wonder Woman, that make this a different thing, and introduce those big characters like Superman and Wonder Woman and Green Lantern, and do it in a way where each story has a unique personality, but then they also fit together. I think would be, you've got one of the biggest movie stars possibly with Robert Pattinson in the role, so add to that people of his, in his same realm, his same orbit, add those characters like he did like Matt Reeves did with this. So what's next? For sure they're doing Batman 2, but we'll see how this world expands from here on out. But I definitely want to see more. So also, if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate the support, and if you could hit that like button, it would help out the channel. And check back I definitely want to cover the Penguin show, so check back for that. And I'm working on a new video for possibly how I would introduce Superman in this universe. So thank you guys for checking this out. Appreciate it.